Welcome back. As a reminder, my name is Kate Watson, and I'm your instructor for this course, and we're ready to introduce one of the most foundational concepts related to motivational interviewing called ambivalence. By and large, the people who we work with, live with, and love will likely feel ambivalent about making some changes in their lives or making decisions. And that is as true for victims and survivors as it is for anyone else who struggles to make things better in their lives. Ambivalence exists when a person feels at least two ways about something at the exact same time. Imagine a person who wants to feel safe but doesn't know how to get there. Imagine a person who sees the benefits of counseling but avoids going to the meetings. Imagine a person who believes he or she could manage stress in healthy ways, but chooses to drink alcohol or abuses drugs anyway. These people are ambivalent about doing something a little bit different in their lives. They feel at least two ways about it. There is a part of them that could make the case potentially for doing it, and simultaneously, there is a part of them that could make the case against it. Let's take a more specific case, Frank. Frank feels harassed in his workplace. People are always commenting on his appearance, his body, and even touching him when they compliment his good looks. And Frank is getting very uncomfortable with this behavior, especially when it comes from his own supervisor. He wants it to stop, and he wants his supervisor to be held accountable for her actions. But he's nervous about reporting it to human resources. He doesn't think anyone will believe him, and he's worried about retaliation if anyone even finds out that he made a complaint. Frank is ambivalent about what to do in this situation. There is a part of him that could make the case for making a report to human resources. And there's a part of him that is feeling held back through his fears and worries. He feels at least two ways about this situation. He wants to report it and he doesn't want to report it. So Frank tells his sister, Cassidy, about the situation. Cassidy wants to help her brother. Her desire to help kicks in, and right now it's in overdrive. And she begins saying things like, "You need to say something about this, Frank. You can't let this go on. Don't be afraid. Those people in HR are there to help you. Just go. You'll feel so much better if you just go talk to someone. I'll go with you if you want." Cassidy has what we might call a very strong or even out of control writing reflex. The writing reflex refers to a person's kind of instinctual urge to want to problem solve and fix things, the desire to make things better. It's called a reflex because people rarely even realize that they're doing it. What do you think is the outcome after Cassidy's writing reflex comes out? So remember, we have an ambivalent person, Frank, speaking to someone who's just salivating at the thought of solving a problem today, Cassidy. And you see in the diagram those two arrows meeting. What happens when the writing reflex meets ambivalence? Well, commonly, people tell me things like frustration. And I might say, okay, who do you believe is frustrated in this interaction? And people say, Frank. Frank is so frustrated because Cassidy's telling him what to do. And yes, very likely, Frank is frustrated by this. Very likely he doesn't appreciate being pushed around and being told what to do. And very likely it feels disempowering for someone who already feels his boundaries being violated at work. I would argue, however, I often see professionals across many fields also feel that frustration. So in this case, it would be the person in the Cassidy role who says, "Fine, Frank, don't take my advice. I don't care. I was only trying to help." And that kind of frustration comes out from both sides. The person with the writing reflex is frustrated, and the person who's ambivalent also feels frustrated. Sometimes when I ask, well, what do you think happens when these two arrows meet? Some people will tell me, oh, shutdown. It's just a complete shutdown. And I might ask, who do you believe is feeling shut down? And a lot of people say Frank. Frank will just shut down. He'll just stop speaking. And yes, I think that is a very common outcome here. It's a very common scenario where Frank will just stop talking and maybe even regret ever bringing it up. Again, though, I also sometimes see the Cassidys here shutting down. Sometimes it comes out in the form of, you know what, I have nothing left to say. I told you what to do. It's up to you. It's your life. And I'm just not even going to talk about this anymore. Why don't you come back when you're ready? Sometimes people say, well, people will just fake it. Frank will just smile and nod, and he'll say he's going to do what Cassidy's saying, but he really won't. And yes, I call that polite cooperation. Sometimes when the writing reflex comes out and one person is saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, it's the ambivalent person who will say, okay, yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. And I'm going to give that some thought, and I have never thought about it that way before, and I appreciate your advice. And what I'm trying to indicate there, or sort of mimic, is the act of just smiling and saying thank you and saying that's really helpful, when really it wasn't, and the person's just trying to get through the interaction. Sometimes, although I think this is maybe a little bit more rare, sometimes it becomes a full-blown confrontation, and it may turn into, don't tell me what to do, you don't get my life, back off, why did I ever come in here to talk to you? However, the most common scenario we see becomes this sort of point-counterpoint, where maybe the person with the writing reflex offers a suggestion, like, I really think you need to go to HR and talk about this, what do you think? And the ambivalent person will offer a reason why that won't work. Well, I thought about that, but I just don't think that they're going to keep this confidential. And what this turns into is kind of the suggestion followed by, yes, but that won't work because. And you probably know this feeling, even if not from your work, maybe just in your life. You know the experience of offering someone a piece of advice and they tell you why that's not going to work. And sometimes it feels like we're throwing out suggestions and the person who we expect to be receiving them is just kind of swatting them away. You say, how about this? And they go, nope, that's not going to work. Tried that one. That's impossible. I don't see that panning out. And that too becomes frustrating for both people in the interaction. The person who's throwing the suggestions starts to feel like, man, this is really difficult for me and I'm doing all the work. Why do I want it more than the other person does? And how come I'm working harder? And the person who's receiving all these ideas, who feels like they've got to swat them away, is sometimes feeling a bit imposed upon. And this is likely what happens when ambivalence meets the writing reflex in a conversation. Whichever outcome you notice, it's safe to say that it's rarely a positive outcome. Well, sometimes, in fact, studies show that maybe around 10% of the time, or 10% of us, may respond positively to the push we feel when someone's writing reflex comes our way. In motivational interviewing, however, we are generally focused on how do we serve the greater majority of us who don't respond particularly well to that writing reflex coming our way. So in motivational interviewing, we are asking advocates to do two things. One is listen for the ways that people describe their ambivalence, and two, try if you can to relax that writing reflex. See if you can find ways to soothe and calm down that urge inside of you to want to solve someone's problems. Sometimes that means having a little talk with your writing reflex and letting it know you may get your chance, just take your time and slow down. And as you're digesting this information, I would encourage you to think about something in your own life that you are ambivalent about, something that maybe you've considered changing that you haven't changed yet. You maybe feel two ways about it, and I encourage you to reflect on those two sides of you and listen for the language people use to describe the ways that they are torn when they're experiencing ambivalence as well.